All right. Hi, how are you, Ursula? Nice to meet you, and thank you for being here. Can you take a few minutes just to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about In Her Sight?
Sure, Jenny, thank you for having me. I am the co-founder and CEO of In Her Sight, which is an anonymous company ratings platform designed to serve professional women. So we give women insights into the gender equality at companies that they're considering working for or that they might be applying to. And we take all of the data and insights that women provide about their experiences at work, and we turn them into these public facing scorecards for women and also into data and analytics that we can use to help companies understand women, the diversity among us, and how to better support them in the workplace.
Awesome. And I think you all have been in operation for about 8 years or so. Is that correct?
We have the idea for In Her Sight dates way back when I was a new mom for the first time, and I was switching on to the conversation about women at work and starting to think about and look at women's experiences at work from a very new angle and perspective. I think most women have a switching on moment, as I call it, to the gender equality conversation at some point in their lives. And for me, it was that motherhood period. And that was when I started to be really interested in the type of support that women were getting at work, and more importantly, the type of support they weren't getting at work. And what I started to uncover was pretty astonishing for me at the time. I was looking at all of these really motivating and exciting statistics and data around the contributions that women make to the workforce, whether it's just in the sheer volume as half of the workforce and talent pool, or the business benefits that we bring, whether it's in productivity or it's in engagement or it's in better decision making. And then on the other side of that, I was looking at the level of support that companies provide to women around their needs and what success means to women, whether that's advancement or parental leave support or safety and security. And there was just such a big disconnect in the value that women provide and drive in our economy and in our workforce and the support that they were getting. On that one hand, we had all of those fabulous stats about outperformance and ROI and across all different aspects of an organization. And on the other hand, we had stats like less than 5% of Fortune 500 CEOs are women. And at the time, just 12% of private sector employers offer fully paid parental leave. Just this massive disparity in the support versus the results that were driven. And I became fascinated in that and started to think about and build toward accelerating progress to bring those two things more in line, so that we had these great contributions and great support from the employers who were benefiting from women's participation at work.
hmm Yeah, the advancement piece really resonates with me because at times I had gone on maternity leave, and one of my largest fears was how, if I'm gone for X amount of time and have the luxury to do so, because I am able to do that, and not many are, how will my voice still resonate within my career, within my organization, within my company, if it's gone for a certain amount of time? So that conversation around advancement, I think, is so important, just because there's time gaps that can happen for new moms or individuals caring for others. So.
Yeah, the caregiver challenges are immense, especially right now, as I think you and I both know, as as parents of young children. But the interesting thing about whether it's parental leave or access to equal opportunities and advancement or flexibility or all of these different things that we measure at In Her Sight, the interesting thing is that these are things where companies typically have policies or programs in place designed to support their employees. So we measure all of these things that companies are measuring and managing themselves. But the difference is that while companies are saying, how many weeks of parental leave do we offer? How much paid time off do we offer? How many women are in these different roles or at different levels of the organization? We're looking at it from the women's perspective of how satisfied are they with the implementation of those policies, those programs, and those numbers. And this is really important, I think, because when we talk about progress and we talk about support for women across all these different aspects of what they care about, there is that piece of companies getting it right on paper. And then there's the other piece, which you alluded to, which is companies getting it right in practice. And if we don't have both, we don't make any progress at all, because we have women who don't just feel like they might be penalized in advancement for gaps and for time away, but they are. Or we have women whose jobs change when they come back from maternity leave and they are no longer on the path, or they're pressured to come back early. Or we have companies where there's great representation of women in leadership on paper. 50% of the leadership team is filled by women, and yet maybe their voices aren't heard in the conversations. Maybe they're not included in the key decision making, and the others in that organization can feel that and see that. And therefore, that thing that looked really great and perfect on paper actually in reality is broken and it isn't working. And so that's really how we came to measuring the things that we measure, for exactly that reason that you brought up, which is that experience or those thoughts or those feelings of how will it impact this, they're just as important as the policies and so on that are available or made available by the company.
You're talking a lot about data and metrics. Has there been anything that has surprised you as the pool of data and the information that you've been receiving? What's been surprising that's been positive, negative, not as important as you would have assumed? What's been something that's kind of been a change in your perspective?
My perspective, I'd say, is it changes all the time, in part because we collect data all the time. So, just to give anybody who's listening some context, I mentioned that we have an anonymous company ratings platform for women. Women have shared their insights across more than 200,000 companies in the US of what it's like to work there, across 18 different categories that we capture and measure that we know are important to women's experiences. That alone is tens of millions of data points that we look at, and we've been able to watch and see how things are changing across those metrics by industry, by company size, and all of this as the conversation about different aspects of gender equality have changed over time too. So we get to look at all of these interesting trends and see things like, you know what, we've seen a lot of improvement in the finance industry in terms of big name promotions, pushes for more transparency about stats and gender diversity stats. And we actually have seen improvements in scores along the way across a lot of the finance industry's metrics. So we get to see cool and interesting trends like that that sometimes line up with what we're hearing in the news and sometimes don't. But as we're doing all of that data collection, we are also running a whole other side of our research business, which is listening to the needs of working women. And every couple of weeks, we are asking questions of working women to find out what's top of mind, what's important to them, where are their pain points right now, how do they want to be supported. So we're learning things constantly about how women's needs are changing. Of course, in the last couple of years, a lot of that has been around the effects of both the pandemic and also the racial equity awakening that the country had with Black Lives Matter, and how those are being carried forth by women in the decisions that they're making around work or what they need from their employers to feel included, or like they belong, or like they can juggle their work and their lives right now. Um, so I think one of the findings that ties into that I think is particularly powerful is some of our recent research showed that just 15% of women are likely to apply to, accept a job offer from, or stay at a company that does not have visible and measurable DEI engagement, and that's diversity, equity, and inclusion. So this really speaks to how important this is to women's experiences at work. They want to know that companies haven't just been listening to the conversation that's been happening for the last 10 years and deciding to opt out, but they're engaging, and they're engaging meaningfully in this area, because women understand that not every company experience is going to be created equal, and they have to do the important work to make sure they're entering an environment where they can succeed, whatever that looks like for them. And so I think that that's one of the things that doesn't necessarily surprise me, but I think demonstrates the cumulative effect of the past 5 to 10 years of awareness around these issues. I wish that the cumulative effect of that awareness was more change, and we're working on that still. But it's we still have quite a long way to go when it comes to gender equity and gender parity across most of the things that we measure.
When you're sharing this data with organizations and companies that you're working with, where is there hesitation? And I'm not meaning that in a there's bad intentions, but where do people assume there will be obstacles or challenges that they feel somewhat frozen or unable to move forward, when you can then share some processes and procedures that can help alleviate that fear? But what's causing trepidation from some of the companies when you're reporting out?
I think that that can really vary depending on the industry, the company size, where they are in their DEI journey. I think one of the things that we have talked a lot about recently, and there's sort of mixed results in terms of the response and how confident companies feel moving forward, is around ongoing remote work for women and for all employees. But that push being from women and talent from underrepresented backgrounds who are not ready to return to the office in the same way that they were. They're not sure when they will be ready. We've been providing a lot of data showing that hesitation and that reluctance. And when companies are receiving it, especially those companies or those stakeholders who are responsible for DEI and for hiring and making sure that those initiatives stay on track, there's a lot of desire to support that, but a lot of challenge sometimes either getting the executive buy-in for it, or for knowing how they're going to support the differences in who's coming into the office versus who's choosing to stay home, and making sure they're still going to have access to equal opportunities and things like that. So that's been an area that companies have been working on. And I'd say we love when we hear that companies are using our data to push for the change in the direction that they need. And we've had companies decide that their return to office policy needs to be changed because they see how much it will exclude this important talent segment. And so that's an example of one of the ways that we provide that information, and the ways it can either face some hurdles when it's internalized, or actually lead to change.
If there were leaders within organizations listening to this conversation now, what would be some of the top 3 things that you would recommend they do this week? What's something that they could take as an action item to do right now?
So again, we could get more specific depending on their challenges, but if I were to keep it broad to what are the things that the companies who are really succeeding at DEI, what are some of the things that make them more successful or the reasons that they are successful? One of those is actually not just listening to me, but listening to your employees. And I mean that not just from your own internal surveys or your own conversations, but the successful companies that are adapting, that are evolving, and that are creating these inclusive cultures, they create comprehensive listening systems that involve getting feedback and collecting insights in lots of different ways through lots of different channels, both internally. So, yes, those surveys, those one to ones, those company town halls, the anonymous ask your question to the company type tools, but also externally. So, these leaders are looking for external sources of information like ours and others to understand those populations better. So they're not putting all of the work on,
Mhm.
say, women at the organization and making them bring these issues to light to them. They're saying, all right, we're going to find other ways to understand their needs so we can bring them forward. So listen first and then show that you're listening by taking action. Don't, if you're not planning to actually incorporate that into any of your decision making, it's going to fall flat. It's not going to have the result you want. So listening, I'd say transparency is something I would push for. I'd say that any company that is worried that sharing where they are across some of these diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives, if they're worried that sharing that is going to hurt them, they need to flip that and understand that not sharing it is hurting them more. So, especially today, talent, consumers, we all know when a company is being authentic, genuine, and transparent. So, in this case, if a company doesn't want to share their stats across senior leadership, for example, that's a bigger red flag than a company that's saying we only have 10% women in leadership. We own that. That's why we want you here, because we want to change that. So being willing to own and share where you are in your journey is super important. And then I think the other thing that I would recommend for a third would be effective storytelling. So this is a little bit more nuanced. This is something that I would recommend that leaders start to think about, is that if you really want to create a diverse environment that welcomes and includes talent from all backgrounds and especially women and marginalized talent, one of the things that you can be really effective is uh, sharing their stories. So the talent of the women at the organization, finding opportunities to hear more about their experiences personally and professionally, and have their career stories out there, to show like these are all the different types of people and what they experience and how they manage their work and their life and how we support their growth. So storytelling of your employees, but also from a leader's perspective, telling the story of how diversity has helped your company and why it's a priority, with examples in the company's history of how things are changing, where they're going, and why. The better leaders and employees can get at talking about this, the more it becomes a real part of their culture. And the employees feel the commitment to this. It's not just something that is written on a roadmap or some line item. It's actually being lived in the organization, and that's the third thing. So listening, transparency, and then storytelling.
I think those are great recommendations, and I love the transparency too, because I think there's a bit of a misconception that we all need to be perfect, and that search for progress and moving towards a better future is what's more important than trying to be perfect, because that's never going to that won't work. It's you're never going to be perfect. There's always room.
Yeah, and there's, a perfect company for one woman is different than a perfect company for another. So,
Mhm.
striving for this perfection not only that in itself is sometimes a little bit of a red flag. How do we feel when we all see like a perfect score across everything, that
Right.
when we're searching through reviews for a product, it's like, uh-oh, what's happening here? This doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel authentic.
Mhm.
But also recognizing that wherever you are today as an organization, there are people who are going to be great for your culture and a great fit for where you are. They also will be able to help you advance so that you can continue to grow and expand the people who you are a good fit for in terms of your own cultural and policy development.
If there are individuals that are interested in getting more involved, sharing their story, or potentially bringing resources forward to their organizations, what should they do next? They've closed this video, they go to your website. Now, what should they do?
Well, from an individual perspective, I always try to emphasize how important it is that there's cooperation and collaboration among all of us to get to that next better place. So, in order for us to work together to progress gender equality, the number one thing you can do with a platform like ours is share the insights into your own company. So, rating your workplace, it's anonymous, it takes 2 minutes. It's all optional. So if there are things that you don't know about, you can skip them. It's a very stress free practice, but it is the number one most important step that you can take to actually push this forward. And it benefits your organization and all of the others out there who are trying to understand where they fit in all of this, and where do they need to do work, and where are they already finding success. So please rate your company on intersight.com. And while you're there, if there are particular either programs that you think your company needs to improve, or if there are issues that you're facing at work, we have an incredible content uh, piece of our platform. It's all of our career resources, where you can learn more about anything from being a better ally to understanding microaggressions to how to have an effective employee resource group. So there's just a lot that you can use depending on your goals.
That's great. Um, after I know we're coming to a close, but after the last 8 years of work, are you feeling optimistic about the future and the narrative that's currently in the workplace now?
I think that we still have to assess the setbacks from the last couple of years. But I think that we've certainly never had better tools and better data for making the change that we need. So I'm always optimistic when those tools are growing, that we can get where we want to go, and we can get there faster than we anticipate, with that action and that collaboration and cooperation from people who we need a lot of women to share their experiences for this to become one of those key drivers of change. But I tend to be an optimistic person, so I think I think I think there's a lot of positive change that can come out of the hardship that we've all been through. It's shaken things up, and you know what? We need to shake things up, especially when leaders and when HR teams are thinking about how they support their employees. This certainly is giving them sort of a good awakening to, like, things are changing. We need to evolve. What can we do, and how can we be better?
Yeah, I mean, now is the time to really reassess what's important within an organization and how we support one another. So I hope everyone that views this video can go to inhersight.com, put your perspective in there, make your voice be heard. And then also those resources are going to be really great just to really support the conversation in your own organization. So Ursula, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And I hope to see more of you.
Me too. Thanks, Jenny.
Thanks.